Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. Today I'm going to talk about Garrett Graff and his new book, which I haven't read yet, by the way. Actually, this book, it's called UFO, The Inside Story of the U.S. Government's Search for Alien Life Here and Out There. It was published November 14th. And it seems like ever since this book came out, it's been all over. This guy, Garrett Graff, he's been all over mainstream news talking about his book. They have no problem bringing this guy on to talk about it because you know why? Because he's basically telling us that there's really nothing to this. There's not enough evidence to show that there's extraterrestrials here. Just late last week, there was a show on NBC, Meet the Press. It was a half-hour episode it was a pretty decent episode about the UFO situation, but there were a couple of things that in that episode that I didn't agree with, and of course it was the presence of Garrett Graff, who I never heard of in this field until just recently, until all of a sudden the mainstream news this guy starts popping up all over the place, on all the networks, it seems, like on various different programs, and most recently on that Meet the Press on Friday, which is hosted by Chuck Todd. Where they were talking about UFOs. I'll leave the link so you could check out that Meet the Press episode yourself. There were some interesting aspects to it. But again, this inclusion of Garrett Graff, like who is this guy? When did he start? When did he get involved in UFOs? I never heard of him before until, not related with UFOs anyway, until just recently. Since the mainstream news felt necessary to start shoving this guy down our throats along with his book. Right. And now his book, by the way, which I haven't read yet, but I have a feeling when I do read it, I'm going to be very, very upset, even more upset than I am right now. His book, UFO, The Inside Story of the U.S. Government Search for Alien Life Here and Out There. Basically, he's given the government a free pass on this. He says there's nothing to this. He's found no evidence whatsoever that the government has been hiding extraterrestrial secrets, anything to that effect. He basically, in the interviews that he's been on, like for instance on this Meet the Press, he says that it's that what people are seeing out there is advanced technology, maybe tech that's been developed by people here or our adversaries, or it's some sort of natural phenomenon like meteors and things like that. Right. And that's why this guy, all of a sudden, Garrett Graff, is all over mainstream news these days. This is gaslighting. That's what this guy is sent out there to gaslight. I don't know who instructed this guy to put this book together, but I have a feeling that either he's really stupid or he's part of some sort of cover-up effort. I really don't know. It's either A or B, and I don't understand why the mainstream news is pushing this guy like he knows what he's talking about, because he has no idea what he's talking about. But anyway, let's just look at who he is. Okay, here's some of the books that he's published in the past. He's Watergate, A New History. He's talking about things like that. This guy worked at Politico. Here's what it says on Wikipedia about him. Garrett Graff is born in 1981 and is an American journalist and author. He is the former editor of Politico magazine, editor-in-chief of Washingtonian magazine, and an instructor at Georgetown University in the Masters in Professional Studies Journalism and Public Relations program. Now, this is the first time, apparently, that he's dipped his toe into UFOs, and he has done so, and he's not that good at it. He obviously doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, if you're going to go on TV and make statements that the government knows nothing, absolutely nothing about extraterrestrials, but there's a cover-up, but they haven't been covering up extraterrestrials. They're just covering up objects that are created by adversaries or it's natural phenomenon and things like that. He hasn't seen any evidence. Obviously, he hasn't done any research. He hasn't done enough research. He said it took him 2 years to put this book together. He needs to throw another 10 years or so in there before he starts putting out books like this that basically seems to me this is just to confuse people. It's to gaslight people. That's what it is. This book is pure gaslighting. How come we don't see people like Richard Dolan on TV talking about UFOs and his research? This guy doesn't deserve to be on mainstream news, but guess what? Mainstream news wants people like this on there to float these ridiculous ideas about what the government knows and doesn't know. And this guy's basically giving them a free pass. His research stinks, obviously. I mean, he wouldn't be making statements like this, right? If he did research, if he conducted the right research. So he's either lying to us, gaslighting us, part of the establishment, and he knows that this is what the establishment wants to push, this kind of nonsense. Or he's really stupid, and I don't know. It's either one or the other. What else could it be, right? Like for instance, like for him to make statements that the government hasn't been doesn't know anything about extraterrestrials. Obviously, he hasn't done any research on this. Particularly, just start at Roswell. You will see over 100 witnesses at least, really good witnesses, first and second hand witnesses to the government recovering alien bodies and a flying saucer out in the New Mexico desert back in July of 1947. If he would have done this, he would have known. And that the Air Force really never had an explanation. You had all these witnesses, people that that were part of the United States Army Air Forces at the time. The top intelligence officer, for instance, Jesse Marcel, he outright said that whatever was there could not have been man-made. And there were other people. There was Walter Haut, the communications director in Roswell at the time, who signed a sworn affidavit stating that he actually saw the alien bodies and the craft. And that's just a handful of them. But see, this guy doesn't really. If he is going to try to tell us that the government knows nothing about extraterrestrials and they really that maybe they haven't been doing a good enough job trying to figure out what they are, then he's obviously living in another universe here than we are, because they have been studying this secretly for decades, right? There's no question about it. They've been studying it secretly for decades. There's a secret control group, Majestic 12 or whatever, who knows what it's called these days. But there's most certainly a control group in place that has been sitting on this secret and has been retrieving these objects when they crash, and they've been reverse engineering them. That this guy doesn't see that. But see, that's why he's all of a sudden a darling in the mainstream news. I really don't want to waste my money on his book, which, by the way, is already a bestseller according to Amazon. But that's because of the press that he's been getting. Look at his faces on TV all the time lately. This guy, what did he do? Nothing. And he's just gaslighting us with his dumb book. I am certain that the book probably stinks. I haven't read it yet, but based on his comments that he's made publicly during his time, the times that you see him on TV, obviously he doesn't know what he's talking about. He hasn't done his research, because if he comes, the conclusions that he's spewing on there are completely bogus and nonsense and not true. And the other thing about the show that bothered me was Chuck Todd, who's the host of this Meet the Press. He started off early on in his conversation. He made a comment that in the early days, Hollywood depicted space aliens as little green men who curiously spoke perfect English. I don't know what universe he's come from either, because you know what, I'm a student of film in addition to my interest in the UFO / extraterrestrial reality phenomenon, right? So I know I saw a lot of movies throughout my life, and I didn't see anything from the 1950s from where he's talking about, where there were little green men who talked in perfect English. I have no idea where that came from. Maybe some comic books, but not from Hollywood. But it's little things like that that get me upset. But I just want to warn people out there that this Garrett Graff, I don't know if he's a plant from the establishment to confuse people with his stupid book, or if he's just idiotic and dumb. I don't know. I can't imagine that someone like this is dumb. So I have to believe then that he must be some sort of a plant, and he was told by somebody in the Pentagon to put this book together. Tell him that it wasn't us. Tell him it's not extraterrestrial. That we're trying to keep secret our own secret weapons and stuff that we're developing. That's all it is. Tell him that. Tell him anything. Just get him off our back. That's what I see. That's how I see this. So don't trust Garrett Graff, and I would not tell you what. Don't buy his book either, because if what he's saying on TV is any inclination, then you know his book's gonna suck too. Anyhow, moving on. I just want to get that off my chest. I've been thinking about that all day since the last couple of days here, and I saw him on that show, and I just needed to say these things because people need to be aware that this book that this guy put out is junk. But you look at all the great reviews he's getting too from places like the Wall Street Journal, one of the rare books on the topic that manages to be both entertaining and factually grounded. Yeah, that's the Wall Street Journal, though. Again, how could you trust any of these people, these groups? They're all part of the establishment. How could you trust them? The perfect guide for readers interested in learning how that discussion has evolved, a narrative as compelling as Graff's other works. That's the Associated Press. Here, loads of fun and Graff's agnosticism has the potential to appeal to skeptics and believers alike. A fascinating dive down the rabbit hole. Publishers Weekly. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, okay. An entertaining tour through the world of flying saucers, aliens, and weird science. Kirkus Reviews. Now, I am going to buy this book and I am going to read it. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to spend money on this book. I really don't want to do that, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it because I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to come back with a review on it probably in the next week or two. Right, but obviously I need to do this now. Unfortunately, I got to waste money on some garbage like this. But based again on what this guy is saying, he's gaslighting. This is all pure gaslighting. I mean, for him to make statements on TV saying that the government doesn't know, I don't think the government knows anything. There's no evidence whatsoever of they're covering up extraterrestrials. That's absurd. Now, again, I'm just paraphrasing, but that's what it comes off as. So this guy's a doofus. I would not recommend to buy his book. Again, I haven't read his book yet, but based on the comments that I've seen in the interviews all over mainstream news now for the last couple of weeks, Garrett Graff in his new book about UFOs, he tells all. He tells nothing. He tells nothing. He gaslights. That's what he's doing. He's gaslighting. Anyway, I'm going to move on from that. But I just wanted to point that out to people so people are aware of what's been going on here. Anyway, I want to go through. I haven't done a discussion on all the polls that I've conducted recently on Spotify, so I'm going to go back a few here and we'll get caught up here a little bit. Okay, for the episode Corrupt Politicians Plot to Squash Schumer UFO Transparency Amendment Reports Suggest, I asked this question: do you believe UFO disclosure would cause a reaction from our extraterrestrial visitors? 67 people have voted for so far. There's 16 days left. Yes, say 29 or 43.3%, and while 38 people or 56.7% say no. So it's pretty close, right? Do you believe that the question basically is okay? Say that somebody in the government finally comes out, or maybe a bunch of people from different world governments come out and finally admit the truth, right? Is it going to cause some sort of a reaction from our extraterrestrial visitors? It could be. There could be, maybe. But I don't. I guess I have yes and no here. I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe I should have thrown in there. I don't know, because it could be. It could happen. But then again, to me, it's a 50-50 proposition. I really don't know what will happen. Maybe nothing. I think those beings have to know that there's enough of us here that do know that they're here already. So why let the rest of us know? Why would that change anything, really? So I really don't know. I don't know the answer to that one. All right, for the next one, for the episode, and this played for. This was the episode Canadian Teenager Abducted by Monsters in Flying Saucers / Loeb Fends Off Phony Scientists. I asked this question: what do you believe is the reason behind the buzzing or humming sounds some people hear when encountering extraterrestrials? And I had 4 different choices here. 7 people, or 10.4%, say it's alien language sounds. 10 people, or 14.9%, say it's subliminal messaging. 15 people, or 22.4%, say other, while 35 people, or 52.2%, say it's alien craft sounds. Yeah, now I heard this sound. A lot of people talk about this humming or buzzing sound, and I've experienced this sound in my life, as a lot of people know. And, it's, I don't know. My idea for a long time was that that was from the craft, perhaps. Maybe the craft was, after I realized it was aliens 10 years later, I realized, well, it must have been the craft making that sound. But I don't know. Maybe it is alien language sounds. According to the story that I was talking about during that episode, the Canadian teenager abducted by monsters in flying saucers. There was this kid back in the 60s gets abducted by aliens, and when one of them starts talking, it sounded like a hive of bees. So maybe it is their language. I don't know. That's the whole thing. In my experience, when I had that experience in 1977, I heard, I wake up to this sound. That was the thing that initially I noticed when I was sleepy. I'm waking up. What the hell is that? What am I hearing? And then I see that there's something standing by the bed, and I can see that it has only, a thin arm with these 3 fingers on it, and it was getting closer to my head. And the whole time was this buzzing sound. that's at that time, my in my head, from that point, and for probably 10 years, I would say, I really believed that it was Satan, that it was the devil or something. I had no explanation. I knew it was real. I even though I tried to convince myself it didn't really happen, it couldn't happen, there's no way. But then in the back of my mind, I was like, no, you were wide awake. You were awake for 20 minutes, and there's no question about it. There was something there. It really happened. It really did happen, despite how I tried to convince myself otherwise. But I lived for 10 years under the notion that there were demons in the room there. I had no idea. That's what it was. But it was extraterrestrial. That's what it is. There's no question in my mind now. I've come to that conclusion. It had to be, right? And then years later, of course, I did see an extraterrestrial craft with somebody else, with another witness. So I know that this is real. So when I was just getting back to what Garrett Graff is, the way he's talking about, saying that the government knows nothing about this stuff, he's a liar. That guy's a liar. Hasn't done his research, or he's lying, or it just makes you angry, because when you sit back and you're somebody who knows and has experienced these things, and your government's telling you we don't know anything about it, that this is all phony. It's probably atmospheric phenomena. What kind of atmospheric phenomena conjures up creatures in your bedroom in the middle of the night? What kind of atmospheric phenomenon would that be? I'd like to know, Mr. Graf. Could you please explain it to me? Anyway, moving on to the next step. For the episode, mainstream news outlets publish embarrassing UFO articles devoid of useful information. I asked this question: have you experienced missing time and later come to believe that extraterrestrials abducted you? Now, the results here are pretty interesting, actually. 54 people, or 84.4%, say no, but there are 10 people. And there's 64 votes so far. 10 people say, or 15.6% say yes, they've experienced. So some of the people listening to this show have obviously encountered extraterrestrials and experienced missing time, and then later have come to understand that, to believe or to realize that they were abducted by aliens. That's very interesting. So there's a lot of people out there. That's a pretty decent percentage of the people listening to my show who have actually experienced missing time and come to believe later that it was extraterrestrial. Okay, for the episode Flying Saucers Stuns Father and Son in 1952 New Jersey / UAP Disclosure Act legislation update, I asked this question: what is the explanation behind the object seen in the series of photographs taken by New Jersey resident George Stock on July 1st, 1952? Okay, 49 votes so far with 20 days left. 0 people said weather balloon. 1 person or 2% say swamp gas. Now that was somebody just trying to, get a stir out of me. Thank you. Yes, we all know it wasn't swamp gas, but it's, jokingly, I wouldn't be surprised if someone from the military were to come forward and say something stupid like that. Maybe Garrett Graff. Maybe if we ask Garrett Graff, he'll tell us it's an atmospheric phenomenon. Maybe it's a meteorite that just he caught it right before it crashed, and it looked like a flying saucer. Maybe that's what Garrett will tell us, right? Let's see here. 3 people, or 6.1%, say it was a kite. That was no kite. That's not a kite. Sorry, you're wrong. 5 people, or 10.2%, say it was a military craft. No way that we had a military craft that could fly around and hover in the sky and then take off without any sound whatsoever. No. Bzzz, wrong. 6 people, or 12.2%, say other, and another 6 people, or 12.2%, say it was a hoax. I don't think it was a hoax. No, I think it was real. He had at least 5 pictures there that we see, and I think he really captured something extraterrestrial. That's my belief on that one, anyhow. And 28 people, or 57.1%, do agree with me that it was extraterrestrial. Yes, I believe George Stock took several pictures of an extraterrestrial craft on that day back in 1952. Okay, for the episode Whistleblowers Expose CIA Involvement in UFO Retrieval Program, I asked this question: at this moment, does it feel like the bureaucratic lid that covers UFO and extraterrestrial secrets is about to blow off? 88 votes so far with 23 days left, and it's pretty close. 37 people, or 42% say no, while 51 people, or 58%, say yes. Actually, at that day, it felt like maybe when you see that story, right, that day, you had 3 whistleblowers contacting the Daily Mail and saying, hey, look at, this is what's going on, and the CIA's has helped orchestrate the recovery of 9 crafts since 2002. It felt like maybe we might be getting somewhere. Of course, as we all know, there's been what's going on in Congress right now with the people holding back, people not wanting to push this legislation forward because they're getting told by the military-industrial complex who pays the bills for them, the campaign bills, hey, we don't want this legislation passed, so they're pushing back against it. But at the same time, okay, you're going to push back on it? Okay, well, guess what? Here comes some more whistleblowers with some more information. Maybe that's the way that we're going to get the disclosure, is by whistleblowers continually stepping up to the plate. We need more of this, and they need to come out and just show their faces, and hopefully one of these whistleblowers could provide the end-all evidence when they do step out of the shadows. That's what we really need here, because we're not going to get it from the government. I mean, the government, like I said, if you're actually sending out someone like Garrett Graff, pushing a book that some guy who only did 2 years of research on, who believes that the government is completely innocent for the most part when it comes to UFOs, right? If you're pushing that guy, you can see how desperate they are, right? All right, for UFO press conference commentary, I asked this question: who will be the first to provide the absolute conclusive evidence that convinces the entire world that there is an ET presence here? There's 70 votes so far, with 26 days left. 10 people, or 14.3%, say governments. 19 people, or 27.1%, say aliens, while the majority, 41 people, or 58.6%, say whistleblowers. Yes, just like I just said, exactly, whistleblowers. I think that's probably going to be how this is going to happen, and how it's going to happen, because the gatekeepers don't want to let go. They just don't want to, and they're going to fight tooth and nail to keep this information from the public as best they can, and they'll destroy stuff. I wouldn't be surprised right now if they would just destroy documentation. There's always this fear I have that all the documents and film and pictures that were taken, like, for instance, at different crash recoveries, like Roswell, for instance, might totally be gone at this point. They might have totally got rid of it just to cover their butts. And that would be sad. That would be terrible. What a terrible injury to history that would be, wouldn't it? Okay, and then for the most recent episode, I asked this question. The name of the episode was this: does every single report involving UFOs and aliens have a prosaic explanation? Now, before I get into the question that I asked, I just want to, that question there is actually absolutely ridiculous. Of course, there's no way. Right. The answer to that question is there's no way. As in that episode, I was going through a whole bunch of different cases, and not every case, of course, but a whole bunch of cases that had been compiled by Jacques Vallée in the 1960s that started from 1868 all the way up to 1968. I stopped at about 1953, and I will continue that in a different upcoming podcast. But the reality of the situation is that there's no way that all these people are making it up. Right. There's just no way. Right? It's absolutely impossible, right? And you think about all the, for instance, the alien abductions in the 70s and 80s. A lot of these people, they didn't read any books at that time. There were no books really, hardly, right? But then when they started going to see psychologists and they would get hypnotized, a lot of them would be telling the same stories over and over again. And they didn't have any other sources to read where they could have got that information from. They wouldn't have known that this other person that was interviewed in another part of the world had the same kind of experience. They just didn't know that. So there's just no way. No, all these people aren't lying or telling fibs. I mean, it's just, or making it up or having misidentifications. Of course, a percentage of them, I'm sure, are probably something else, or could it be a hoax, right? But say if only half of them are true. Say if only 10% of them are true, right? Whatever the case, right? Some of them are most certainly true. They're not all telling lies or making stuff up. Or having hallucinations, especially the cases when you have, multiple witnesses. That's impossible. And then, I asked this question for that episode. Of the various reports discussed in this episode, what percentage would you say involved actual extraterrestrials? And here we go. There was 34 votes so far, with only 5 days left. I guess I must have. Usually I set it up for 30 days, but this one only has 5 days left. Okay, 0 people. Say 45%. 4 people, or 11.8%, say 100%, while another 4 people, or 11.8%, say 0%. So that those two will they eliminate each other. I don't think it's 0%, and I don't think it's 100%. Here's 5 people, or 14.7%, say 25%. Yeah, okay. So even if 25% actually involved aliens, okay, then that's the end of the story, right? 6 people, or 17.6%, say 50%, while another 6 people, or 17.6%, say 90%. And then finally, 9 people, or 25.5%, say 75%. You know, I'm going to go with 75%. I think it'd be closer. I'm going to go with the majority on this one because I think that is the proper percentage. I would say probably 75% would involve actual extraterrestrials. And I believe that 75% is a conservative figure. It's probably more like 90%. I would say 75% is being conservative. I think that that's what probably the case is here. We went through a lot of those cases in that episode, and a vast majority of them sounded like they were legitimate to me. And you had some of them, many of them had multiple witnesses, including some cases had the whole town's, the collection of people throughout the entire village seeing things at the same time. So yeah, I think that that's what's going on there. My biggest issue, of course, is this Garrett Graff today, and his book, and the fact that he's been on every mainstream news channel for the past couple of weeks talking about UFOs, saying that the government really hasn't been doing a good job studying them and figuring out what they are and telling the people what they are, and basically that they most likely are just exotic weapons developed by adversaries or atmospheric phenomenon, right, and has nothing to do with extraterrestrials. That's totally phony and false, and this guy hasn't done enough research, and he doesn't deserve the attention that he's been getting. And that tells me, the red flag goes up, that tells me that obviously the reason he's getting this attention is because this is what the mainstream wants to push at this time. This is what the establishment wants to push this time. Don't forget about what's in the craft. Forget about things piloting the craft. Let's just look at these craft, and we'll figure out that it's probably meteorological or something like that, or adversaries flying stuff around. But it has nothing to do with extraterrestrials. That's his narrative that he's trying to push on TV. So I'm assuming that's the kind of narrative that he has contained in his new book too. So I say beware of being gaslighted by Garrett Graff and the establishment, because I'll tell you what, you can't trust these. You can't trust the mainstream. You just can't trust them. Look at what they do. Look how they handle this. Let's bring out this guy with his book that's pro Pentagon on the UFOs. They just don't know yet. It's probably atmospheric or adversaries. It's not extraterrestrial. That's absurd. And then at one point, actually, in the show, he makes another statement. He says that we shouldn't even be listening to individual stories about extraterrestrial encounters. We should be focused on the objects themselves, like the Galileo project is focusing on the objects themselves. Don't forget about everything else that goes along with it. No, Garrett, you need to study all of it. All of it means something. There's an extraterrestrial present here, Garrett. Anyway, I want to say thank you all for joining me. Until next time.